The Odyssey of the Mammoth is a walking sim with a touch of action that's made in Unreal Engine. It was a fairly short download and jumped me straight into a menu. It's a student project from Studios Bakery, made at the Université de Montréal, with about 20 people who made it as a ballpark figure. Some names are repeated, but there were still a fair few people that had a hand in it. It's got nice visuals and gentle music in the menu, and there are a variety of settings. There are video settings with swaps to windowed and full screen, and others for the resolution, dynamic resolution, and vertical sync. I didn't get it on recording because the issue screwed with my software, but I had a problem where when I changed from windowed to full screen after it loaded in windowed, the mouse became unsynced with the game, so it was selecting down and left from where my mouse actually was. A chance back and forth from windowed to full screen somehow fixed this, so I'm not really sure what happened there. I did play the rest of the game in full screen, however there were clearly some resolution issues, because despite the game being in full screen, my screen recorder footage actually looks like this, so I've had to zoom into it to fit it to the window, but you may have to suffer some black bars. Clearly the game and my screen were not on the same page as to what aspect ratio they were both working on. Visually though, for me, there was no issue. There are audio settings for the master audio, sound effects, and a choice between French or English narration and subtitles. The controls seemed simple, with Q to toggle between making your child come to you or wait, WASD to move, left shift to charge, left mouse to attack, P or escape for a menu, which is a weird combo, but anyway, space to stomp, and E for interact. The game does have controller support too, but it wouldn't really make a huge difference which input you chose from what I saw of the game content. There are 3 slots to start new games in, and I dived right in after that. There's some scenery shots with music and an introduction to your narrator, Scott Bennings. The game frames itself like you were watching a nature documentary, so you control the animal but the narrator speaks as if you were just watching it do its thing. Your job is to make the commute to safety whilst protecting your little calf. Sounds easy. I had a little test and the movement speed is as you would expect for a mammoth, which is fine, and you can clip your horns through walls a little, but it's not a massive issue. There's an indicator at the bottom for your calf's status, whether it's following or staying, and you press Q to call it to you from where it's sat. The interact button is for shoving stones aside, but only specific interactable stones, so don't get too excited about being able to ram stuff around. Your attack button is used to ragdoll puny humans away from your child, launching them into the air like wet old socks. If your child takes damage, there are cloudberry bushes along the way for it to eat and heal. The calf has 3 health points and the bushes heal 1, so ideally you don't want to let it take too much damage. The tutorial segment runs through all these as basic mechanics, but I'll comment on the game in portions rather than in series, because the same basic premise runs through the game from start to finish. You walk along, hear some narration, get attacked by humans, survive, rinse, repeat, all the way through. The combat is generally alright, but to be honest the charge and stomp attacks are actually pretty useless. By the time you wind up the charge, its range is pretty short, and it seems to have a very small hit area, and usually with the child being behind you, if you hurl too far forward and the humans slip past you, you're likely going to have your calf take damage. Similarly, the stomp has a big shockwave, but actually doesn't appear to do damage in that shockwave area, only the portion directly under your feet seems to actually hit anyone. So you run up, do a big stomp, and somehow completely miss everyone. The generic attack is arced, however, and since you swing your head, you somehow get a bit of range in front of you and can take out a line of people. Plus it's way faster to recover from, and unlike the stomp and charge, it doesn't lock you in place at the start or end of using it, meaning you can run around like mad and swing at everything, especially the stuff that gets past you. With the stomp and charge, you have to build up or recover, and that holds you in place while the humans have liberty to run past you and attack your child. The baby's mechanics have their pros and cons. The wait command only works up to a certain range, so for example I entered from a narrow path into a wide open area and wanted my calf to wait at the narrow path so that I could have easy access funneling the humans together so they were easier to kill, or to be able to charge into them and focus them on me whilst the baby waited somewhere protected. But if you go too far away from the baby, it starts following you, which I guess is a way to help if you walk off without it, but alternatively in combat it becomes a nuisance when the baby comes right up to you once the following is activated, and now it's right next to all the humans you were trying to protect it from. If the calf gets attacked, it will run away from the humans attacking it until you go and sort them out, but it can get overwhelmed, and when you're trying to pay attention to all the places the enemies come out of to avoid any slipping past you, it's easy to still believe the calf is well back somewhere safe, when actually it's 3 feet behind you and suddenly takes damage because a stray spear found its way there. If the baby does die, you reload from your latest checkpoint, so it's not the end of the world, but still there are some combat segments I wouldn't want to do again. They're not difficult to win because the people are one-hit kills, it's more that there are so many of them and they crawl out of every crevice imaginable, like wood lice. The game also likes to spawn enemies behind you and your calf as well, which can be annoying at times. In terms of the game mechanics, that's pretty much all the gameplay there is. They vary the combat by advancing enemies from stabbing you with spears to throwing spears, but whilst your mammoth appears to take some damage, I'm not sure if you can actually die yourself. I got an achievement for finishing the game without dying, but I took a few hits at times and it didn't seem to do much, so I don't know if you can. You have no health bar at any rate to monitor it with. Toward the end, the combat becomes endless unless you make it to the tent that the humans are coming from and smash it down. But usually you just wander through a steady stream of people one by one and then wreck stuff and then move on to the next. I failed 1 or 2 combat segments in the whole game, but that was usually a result of the baby creeping up on me when I thought I'd left it somewhere safe and not being able to stop it being surrounded now it had followed me into the open. The carrier of the game is the narration, which gives you a little bit of factual information. For example, that there was an island called Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean that the mammoths migrated to, and when the sea levels rose they survived there in a community after being cut off from the mainland. That island is where you're trying to get to in the end of the game. He also sprinkles his facts in with a bit of bias and personality, and a tad of fourth wall breaking, mentioning that it seems like the mammoths have a camera on them, talking about how it's unfair that the humans look bad and rooting against your mammoth, and then finally changing his mind and rooting against the humans and supporting your mammoth, giving it and its calf a name. There were a couple of glitches in the narration where text would appear and instantly disappear with no voice to match, like the section just got skipped. One time happened in the first level and another in the third. The narrator does a good job with the voice acting, but there are also times where it falls quiet, which is quite nice just to walk and see the game's scenery. Speaking of, there are 3 different levels, with the tutorial included in the first one, and these visuals seem to be the winning feature of the game for a lot of people. They are very nice, with grass and rocks for the first level, forest and caves for the second level, and snowy bergs with auroras for the third level. There were some really nice details in the environment, such as jazzy cave paintings, deep snowdrifts which leave trails of the mammoth's footprint and trunk too, which were nice to fit the theme and make it more immersive. The level transition artwork being cave painting-y style was a nice touch too, and something original to break up the levels. The character models are good but quite light. There's not a ton of depth on the fur of the mammoths, which does occasionally feel a bit washed out compared to the environment, but for the most part it looks good. And the humans are quite small, so it's hard to see the detail on them, but they look alright to me, and the tents and objects look like they're made of patches and wood, as they should do. The aurora was a really nice touch to the third level for the visuals, and I had to stop and admire the icy plains with the glowing light of the stars and campfires for a bit. There are a couple more glitches I noted. Once or twice the calf's following mechanic wouldn't work. It either wouldn't stay, or if it had stayed, it wouldn't start following again. But as mentioned before, the distance limit fixed that, as all I had to do was walk away and it would either latch onto me or get up and start following. There were a couple of jittery cutscenes too, and the camera clipped into the walls a bit whilst inside the cave, but overall nothing was game breakable and all was pretty stable. Overall it's a nicely made game. It's a bit of a nice walking sim, but if you enjoy the quiet and the scenery, you might find the narration a bit annoying every now and again. The combat is so-so for me, since the variety of mechanics didn't really work too well to stop the calf taking damage. It just turned into me either doing circles and mashing left mouse to stop any stragglers during the first parts. Then when it introduced the "you have to fight through people to destroy the hut or they just keep coming" mechanic, I ended up mashing left mouse again, but this time just charging forward, looping back to hit a straggler or two, knowing the calf was never going to stay where I left it, so just making sure I smashed the huts as soon as I could. It can be difficult to keep up with the volume of people, and it's a shame the other attacks are a bit too unwieldy to make decent use out of. The direction of the narration is a good hook to keep you interested if you find the walking part a bit boring though, since you can spend your time hating him whilst he wishes for the humans to kill you, and then cheer along with him when he changes his mind. There's not much exploration to be done, the path is pretty linear, so unfortunately you can't wade around the nice environments looking for fun stuff. It's a pace bouncer between calm walking and sudden ambushes. It's slightly educational, nice visually though not entirely realistic, entertaining enough and generally stable out with a couple of glitches and windowed versus full screen issues. There were some nice touches here and there, but also some touches monotony, knowing you were just walking out of combat to hit some more combat, and it was fairly samey in that aspect. It's a weird one because if you want relaxed you don't always get it, and if you want action you don't always get it. Obviously it's there to simulate a mammoth being ambushed despite trying to mind its own business, but still. It would have been nice if the fighting mechanics were all a bit more capable to help diversify the combat, but it's an easy game with some personality, nice environments and nice music that I got just over an hour out of, so I will give the Odyssey of the Mammoth a 7 out of 10.